course, honey.
It's to die for. I'm telling you, it is the best kind of
Really?
ever eat.
Yeah, it's really good.
Wow, thank you.
And we're going to wait for just a couple of minutes. Commissioner Crope is running late, so, and Commissioner Crawford isn't here, so let's give them each another 5 minutes.
Is it okay to have one now?
You do whatever. It's
Can you
Alright.
just one right now, Dan?
Wow. Want some?
Yeah, but not right now, no.
Okay, good.
I just had dinner and I'm stuffed. Alrighty. We were holding off for the two of you. We figured since both of y'all had children, we were to take that into consideration.
Thank you for the puffs from your wife. I love puffs. That may just be my dinner tonight.
Good, how are you doing?
Yum.
I had a
Give me a bag, so I'm not getting dinner, apparently.
I had a failure.
Ladies and gentlemen,
iPad,
it is
so I'm using my phone.
Wednesday, December 7th. It is 4 p.m. We are going to call the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. If we can all rise for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the many blessings we have, especially noted this time of year as we give thanksgiving and celebrate the holidays with family and friends. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sarah, roll call, please.
Wheelock,
Yes, ma'am.
Lathrop, Kropa,
Yes.
Johnson.
Here.
Crawford. Here. Klaus.
Here.
Max Bauer.
Here. This is our first opportunity for public comment. Sarah, if you would read the rules, please.
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners, which is required to be open to the public under the provision of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions, if any. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. The chairperson may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak. Public comment will be solicited during the 2 public comment periods noted in Rule 5.4, Order of Business. However, public comment will generally be received at any time during the meeting regarding a specific topic currently under discussion by the board. Members of the public wishing to comment should raise their hand or pass a note to the clerk in order to be recognized and shall not address the board until called upon by the chairperson.
At this time, would anyone like to make public comment?
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Mayer. I'm one of the incoming commissioners for 2017, and I would like to revisit something that this board decided earlier this year. I would like the board to revisit the topic of commissioner compensation, and also to define what compensation really is, because I believe that compensation is salary, retirement, and health care. And I think the mileage reimbursement and per diem is not defined as compensation. And I'd like some discussion on that. And I'm hoping that tonight, I know we're going to be talking about the 2017 budget, but it would be nice to go over the 2016 budget so that everyone understands how that budget is going to end up this year. You know, just a real clear summary of where we're going to end up at the end of December. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, what is your goal regarding commissioner compensation? Are you opposed to the present proposal, or are you looking for something else?
Yes, I think commissioners deserve to be compensated, and I believe you felt the same way in the past. You did, I believe, prior to when the decision was made to basically to cut compensation to $1 a year. I don't think that's fair to the commissioners. Any commissioner could decide not to collect certain portions of their compensation if they felt individually that way. I think that would be great. Some are probably doing it already. But I don't believe there's another commission in the state of Michigan for a county that has such a plan as we do. And personally, I could use some compensation. I was running for office before you decided that, and I was planning on running, as I did this year, for commission. So I was always in the back of my head that I thought that was a disadvantage. And in the future, it'll be a disadvantage to people who want to run for office because nobody here today on this board has given up $1 of compensation. You've been collecting compensation all year, and you're going to collect it to the end of the year. And 2 of you aren't coming back, so it really didn't cost you anything. So that's why I think it should come back up again, because a couple of you who proposed that idea, were proponents of it, are leaving.
You are aware it's only a 2-year resolution, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So it doesn't affect the future elections.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well,
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right. Next is our presentation of the proposed budget for 2017.
Madam Chair and fellow commissioners, we're pleased to have the opportunity to present the proposed budget. What we'd like to do is make a few preliminary comments prior to that, reviewing some of the accomplishments in 2016, and who is controlling the,
Here goes Jody.
I would upfront this is an unrehearsed presentation. This is the first time we've done it, so if you would, good. First of all, some of the things that we worked on was the pension stabilization plan. As you know, we did develop one, and for the first time ever, take it down to a MERS board and present that to them in detail. We have not resolved that issue yet, but we are hoping that we'll make another presentation, but another offer to them very soon. We also, for the sake of transparency, started the Pension Advisory Board. Part of the problem that we got in the mess we were in was there wasn't enough communication between the boards and administration and employees. So Pension Advisory Board's charter is to make sure that employees, community, administration, elected officials are always well versed in what's going on with the pension and defined contribution plan. We implemented the Public Act 152-8020 healthcare costs. The projection was to save $622,000 in the 2017 budget. We did an in-depth review of our information technology and are in the process of implementing suggested changes. We did an internal review of the Sheriff's Department and came up with some cost-saving ideas and made those suggestions to department heads. Quality Assessment Panel has gone through the Commission on Aging and has done a very, very thorough job in terms of reviewing policies, procedures, issues in terms of where we're in compliance, where we're not in compliance, and where we can become more efficient and effective, and also where we can actually, for the first time ever, give some money back to the taxpayers of the county. We're in the process of facilities audit. Have completed 4 of the buildings so far, and we'll finish that and have a presentation on all of the assets at the first of the year. We've revised policies to restrict spending, procurement, things of that nature, to make sure that we're getting the best return on our dollar in terms of expenses that we do expend. Eliminate position of elected surveyor, maybe the first time ever that an elected position has been eliminated. And then, of course, the veterans millage, which gives the veterans the ability to have a stable 5-year plan, but also take some pressure off of the general budget as well. We've started Project Cherry Tree, which is for the veterans and is taking advantage of the first change in the delivery system of the veterans in 75 years, and we were the first one out of the box. We've been in front of all the key players. In fact, we have a meeting Monday, 8 o'clock, with the newly elected Representative Congressman Bergman, who is very interested in Project Cherry Tree as well. We've had meetings, a number of meetings with the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. We have one scheduled for January 13th for next year between the two boards, and I think we're going to be getting together with the Sheriff's Department and their individuals on the tribe side to see if we can work out an agreement that will benefit both organizations and the county as a whole. Restructured the county's Economic Development Committee to promote economic development, and really which is job growth in that middle income range of 40 to 80,000. We did interviews last night, and there are some extremely bright young people in this community. We were very impressed with the quality of people who have volunteered wanting to be a part of that economic development initiative that the county's taking on. Reviewed the constitutional officers' compensation. That was done by an ad hoc committee, and it was determined that we were competitive, and no change was suggested in that regard. We found an alternative funding source for the Boardman River Dam Restoration Project due to the Deputy Administrator, Jen DeHaan, realizing that there were environmental issues, and that could be a way for us to use the brownfield funds to take care of that. Again, taking pressure off our general budget. We restructured administrative. We cut half a person in administration, for example, finance and human resources to improve efficiencies, but also lower overhead as well. Retained a professional benefits coordinator to enhance services to the employees, and we've outsourced the management of the resource recovery programs as well. The budget for 2017 is a conservative one. We always like to err on the side of conservatism going forward, and so it's a very conservative budget in our thinking. We fully funded the annual pension payment this year. We set aside funding for OPED. Last year, we set aside $250,000 because I knew we had to start funding it, but we really weren't required to put it on our balance sheet till 2017, which will put an additional $7.7 million in the liabilities on our balance sheet for the 2017. But we funded that in the amount of $600,000. We're going to be meeting our contractual obligations in this budget for salary and wage increases, which under contract we have to adhere to. We've reviewed the dedicated fund balances and found if there is some that are over and are not needed, that we can give them back to the taxpayers for the first time, which I think we're recommending tonight at the board meeting, which I think may be the first time that's ever been done. Invest in necessary infrastructure. We have not invested in infrastructure in this organization for many, many years, and it's quite obvious it has hindered it, and it's made it a more reactive organization. We have plans to invest in infrastructure, in IT, and in some of the assets that our facilities are saying need some tender loving care, and so we have put money in this budget to actually invest in the organization itself, which is badly needed. Doing so without impacting services. And we're not using the fund balance. Last year we used $500,000 to balance it. We're not doing that this year. We're recommending a balanced budget. So certainly looking forward to sharing this with you, and my thanks go out to all of the department heads and my deputy administrator and our Jody Lundquist, our finance person, who have put enormous amounts of time in, and department heads too. I mean, the sheriff was kind enough with his staff to come in Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning and meet with us. So this has certainly been a real collaborative partnership, and everyone has been very understanding and very helpful in helping us put this together. So I thank everyone who is involved in this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Who would like to present
The details of the budget
And I'm looking at our finance director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for all in attendance. I would echo Tom's sentiments about the commitment of the staff here at the county to the services that the county provides to its taxpayers and residents. I would like to acknowledge my staff has been tremendous. Obviously, the timeline that we're bringing this budget forward was not as originally intended with the setbacks that that we did encounter, but my staff was tremendous in helping to overcome those and get us to where we are today. A great deal of effort did go into the preparation of the budget by all of the departments and by my staff. Bound copies of the budget by department and revenue source have been distributed to you. The Uniform Budget and Accounting Act does require specific items on what must be included in the recommended budget and the budget document that is adopted by the board. So this document moves us into compliance with those items, including prior year actual, the current year budget with year-to-date activity, as well as the recommended budget and fund balances. So as Tom had mentioned, part of the review was looking at the fund balances for the various funds. We're only required by law to adopt a general fund budget and budgets for the special revenue funds. So that is what is included in your packet. There's a fairly lengthy transmittal letter where we have talked about some of the accomplishments and issues facing the county today that were then considered in preparation of the budget, as well as some highlights of those revenue and expenditure items, specifically for the general fund. There are columns in the budget document that show the changes that were made from requested to recommended. So for instance, for general fund, there was a memo that went out to the board with a preliminary requested budget for general fund. Any changes then from that document are reflected in the column marked difference. It's in between requested and recommended. And then beside that, you'll also see, I guess I could refer to the document myself so I don't misspeak, since I'm just going off of memory, an increase or decrease from fiscal year 16 budget. So you'll be able to see how those department requests have changed from the current fiscal year. So if they've increased their requests or if they have lowered them with a percentage of that change in the furthest right-hand column. That's all intended to help guide you through, where we were, where we are, and where we're going. Many of the departments came back with very conservative requests. So the total budget download, the AS400 being what it is, a data dump of all of the data that then was put into a more effective format, was 5,689 lines of revenues and expenditures. So very detailed work going through each of those and looking to make sure that they balance between funds, transfers in and transfers out, that requests were reasonable or in line with the rule of conservatism. And with any best budgeting practice, you would want to set your revenues first. You want to reasonably estimate what is assured for the upcoming year, what we can actually count on, and then decide from those available resources what can we allocate, what priorities can we set for funding. Ultimately, the budget setting process is the board's way of identifying its priorities for the community and providing services. So as you go through and see any areas, please do feel free to ask questions. A lot of the department heads are here, so if you have specific questions, it's a lot of information for only one person to remember as I went through these over the course of months, but they are here to speak about their specific department needs or requests, and many of them did not see substantial changes from their requested budget to what administration has brought forward for their recommended budgets. We balance the budget with other strategic decisions for the most part for those departmental budgets that were changed from those line items that the department heads did have the authority to input directly into the AS400, then they were contacted directly. In some instances, for instance, the revenue projections may have seemed high, and then therefore the department heads were contacted and those projections lowered to be more realistic. In many cases, as noted in the transmittal letter, revenues were looked at percentage of growth over the past 5 years. If growth fluctuated from one year to another, then an average was used. If it was still conservative or appropriate to do so, then in some cases it was set to same as last year. The decrease in general fund revenues is largely as a result of the choice not to use any fund balance, because obviously the use of fund balance to stabilize an operating budget is not sustainable in the long run. All right, so that was my background. So first presented after the narrative, you'll find a summary of all funds. If those that are in the audience haven't already, there are copies up front of the summary of all funds that also acts as the table of contents. So you'll see the page numbers for each of the funds on the left-hand side. It's a summary of recommended appropriations only. The revenues are shown with each department as we go back.
Jody, does this take into account the resolution that was passed after the closed session last week?
It does not. So the current, thank you for asking that question. So the current budget was developed with the current legislation that we have to go on that's active, which would be PA 152 with the 80-20 cost share of the annual health care premium. So the budget anticipates that the employees will pay 20% of their health care premium and the employer will pay the 80% under PA 152. Should the resolution to honor the agreements of the various bargaining units move forward, then that means that we would have to identify additional resources to absorb that additional cost of that 5%.
So that means finding an additional $250,000 beyond this budget?
Correct.
Is that money, the 20%, set aside anywhere in this? Like we talked about if you know, with the litigation that would be going on?
Well, it would be just a portion for the ones that are taking us to court, which would be about $115,000, I think, right?
$150,000 in contingency was set aside for the pending litigation by the Sheriff's Department bargaining units. So it was set aside in preparation for this budget document as a contingency in the general fund. The board resolution requested that instructed the Sheriff's Department to reduce its expenditures by an equivalent to that difference. That has not been done in this recommended budget.
And that was $115,000 change for the Sheriff's Department in that resolution?
And before we go any further,
Yes.
rather than have me go like this all night, I prefer to have this a little bit more informal. If somebody's got a question, just lean into your microphone and ask it. I think it's ridiculous as we talk about the budget for me just to go, let's just have an informal question and answer period. If somebody's got a question, chime in.
115?
Yes, 115 was correct.
115 was right.
So looking at the Sheriff's Department, it's a lot of pages. Looking at the Sheriff's Department, there is a difference, and I'm paraphrasing here because I can't find the page. It was something along the lines of $800 and some odd thousand difference in requested budget versus administration recommended budget. So therefore, if we were to add the $115,000 to it, we're looking at $1 million change in our largest department at the county, along with finding an extra $250,000 in healthcare compensation that we lose with that. So being that this is the largest portion of the pie, there's a concern with the sheriff's department budget here. I can't find it. Oh, did I? No, I didn't find it.
Well, while you're looking, let me...
So none of that is in here, is what I'm saying. We have to kind of keep in mind, if the 9 bargaining units agree to that resolution, then that means that the budget changes.
So it would change by approximately $100,000 because we have set aside that $150,000 in a contingency line item.
Okay, great.
So should the 115 be found from the sheriff's department, that difference between the contingency being that it's being shifted from the contingency to the sheriff's department, the difference then would have to be located elsewhere.
Okay.
Well, I think you're not the only one that's confused by the index, because I go through these appropriations and there's not a sheriff's department heading listed.
Well, the weirdest part is my eyesight. I think it's
Well,
just
and
age. I'm trying to find the appropriate place to hold it out to, and I can't. But it's on here somewhere, and it was to the tune of $800,000+ for the sheriff's department.
So the summary is all funds that acts as the table of contents, and the sheriff's department is the largest department in the general fund. So if you then switch, just flip the page, that's
gotcha.
when the general fund begins by revenues, and so there's the pie chart, revenues by source, it's broken out in a table, then recommended appropriations, pie chart, and then the general fund departmental expenditures on page 4.
So the fiscal year 17 departmental requested budget was $15,358,000 and change. The fiscal year 17 recommended budget for the sheriff's department was $14,545 and that. So that shows a difference in the recommended budget versus the requested budget of $813,389. And this would show an increase overall from the fiscal year 16 budget of $260,404, and that is your recommended budget. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we would be looking at an additional $115,000 from the sheriff's department if that resolution were to come to fruition.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here. The CIP fund, $450,000 for IT and infrastructure has been included. Heaven knows we need IT. That AS400 system, I've been whining about it for years. That having been said, $450,000, is that for just an initial purchase, or is this going to be part of money that we're going to have to pay over time to upgrade this system? And where I'm going with this is, do we need to bond to get an IT system that will work? Because clearly what we've got doesn't work, in my opinion.
So no one probably agrees with you more than I do on that point.
Thank you, Jody.
However, so we have made do. The $450,000 would cover. So with the transition of an ERP system, which would, so the primary concern being for the financial data, so those processes that we cover for our general ledger, like our actual accounting, accounts payable, payroll, HR, receipting, all of those financial functions, HR being so heavily related, often an ERP system includes them. It would cover the cost of that initial purchase and transition, but very commonly now the software systems also include support by those companies, so they then have ongoing annual fees. support piece.
This was looked at as an initial investment for next year. What we're also doing is developing an IT strategic plan, and the IT department has been actively doing that even this week, and by the end of January, we expect to have that strategic plan. There will be some outreach to departments in order to assess and understand what software needs they have. I know that soil erosion has been working on a project, the COA has been working on a project, but we really need a plan in place in order to move that forward to make sure that we have the necessary IT infrastructure in place. So this was kind of a first bite at the apple, and we'll continue to plan for that over future years.
And I don't want to, I don't want to get into the weeds, but I do know that COA has been looking at software, and I want to be sure that as we move forward, that whatever we have in the finance department meshes with it.
Absolutely.
Well, keep in mind that we also have other partners such as the city and others that will be.
And I have to tell you, the city, and rightly so, they have been frustrated, they have been complaining, they cannot run the software programs that they want to run because our system will not support it. And it's time, even if we have to, in my opinion, but I will not be here to vote on this, even if we have to bond. The IT system has got to be priority.
We don't plan on bonding. We plan on finding efficiencies. We just met with the city last week, for example, and just saved them $14,000 just because they were paying duplicate cost on software, an example. We had put $334,000 in for the dam project, but using brownfield money frees that money up. The city will partner with us. We're hoping Traverse City Light and Power will partner with us, and we'll have a 3-year plan, which is why we brought the individual in, is doing that for us, so that we can go out, and then we will focus on critical areas that need to be implemented first, finance,
Well, I know
areas like that.
I know the IT director that you have contracted right now is paying for himself in spades.
Yeah, he's
So,
done
I mean, he's saving us.
I'd love to have him stay. I can't afford him, but he's already saved us $85,000 on an AT&T bill already. It's amazing the stuff that he's come up with.
And
So we're hoping that by a good internal continuous review as we go through, that we will have enough cost savings that we'll be able to use that to invest in technology.
All right, the other question I have is regarding the facilities. We're conducting an assessment of county facilities, and we've got facilities that need maintenance. And I guess what comes to mind initially
hiding in the
is
corner.
the Civic Center. How are we moving forward with that?
Well, Marty is hiding in the corner. He doesn't
Marty
think
is trying to hide in the
He doesn't think I
corner.
can see him. I see the top of his head. And you're absolutely right. We're going through all of the facilities to benchmark where we are. We're finding, from what we've found so far, it's not as bad as we thought it would be, but there are some ongoing maintenance issues that need to be addressed. But Marty, would you like to give a brief summary of the, I think you're talking about the Civic Center building itself? And the
Well,
work
that
on
just
those
comes to
issues?
mind, but I mean, we've had other things such as, the equipment that has died
Right.
due to,
Right.
I mean, there are no maintenance records.
Right. That's correct.
At least there were none, but I'm sure there are not.
There are.
There are going to be some as you move forward.
We're taking everything that everybody does on time slips, and we're creating files for every building.
Thank
So we
you.
have preventative maintenance, we have maintenance records, we have Otis elevator documentation, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a day-to-day thing. More importantly, because of the question about the chillers, what happened and what's the next sleeping giant? I thought, well, you buy a house, what do? You get an inspection. And honestly, I thought I had 9 facilities. There are 31 at last count.
Surprise.
There's a lot of them. There are a lot of roofs, a lot of walls, a lot of windows, a lot of foundations. So anyway, the 4 heaviest used facilities, the government center, the law enforcement center, the jail, and then the Civic Center. Those were the first 4 done. Some surprises. One of them was our group has done a great job of maintaining them, ductwork, things like this. But this building has stress cracks. interesting to find out, but they think that it may have settled unevenly, so part of the budget this year will be to have a structural engineer look at this building, do some stress loads, and understand what we're looking at. In my opinion, that takes precedent over carpet, although a lot of people would like new carpet. The Civic Center has a roof over the pool that's not in good shape, and it's a six-figure roof, but it's the original roof and the patches that have been put on it didn't bond, dissimilar materials.
I've been in that pool swimming in the wintertime. Trust me, I understand.
It drips?
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't surprise me. So, there are a few big things, but I think that the good news is when the chillers happened in June, it was what I called a sleeping giant.
Yeah.
And where's the next one?
Uh-huh.
And I think that we're moving in a direction of understanding where those are and what they might be. To the Civic Center, what's the plan? Well, from my perspective, it would be that in this little city, within a city that facilities helps maintain, make sure that everything is good, watertight, solid. If there are problems, they're addressed. It's not, I said this once before, it's not as fun as somebody's desk being adjusted or what have you, because on a day-to-day basis, those are the things that somebody works with every day, and facilities has been very good about addressing those things. We probably haven't been as good about identifying some of the bigger projects like the roof, or I'm sure that the guys from facilities have walked by stress cracks that they've seen in the walls.
And just
never noticed.
ignore them. Yeah.
We have lentils in this building that we have, so on. So there are a few things, nothing alarming, but certainly noteworthy. And so for me, they would rise to the list at the top to be addressed, and then we'll get to the more pleasant things after that.
Madam Chair, while I have you, there were some questions by some commissioners regarding the Civic Center roof itself, and could you assess longevity? Is it going to fall in when someone's swimming, or what the seriousness of that situation is?
The problem's not structural. The undercarriage is fine from everything that the report said. The problem is its ability to shed water, right?
Well, on a roof, that's a real problem.
That is a problem, and hence the leaks that you may have known when you were swimming in the pool. If you look at the photos, it's been patched, and one of the things that I think is interesting is how many people in the community know this. You knew it, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah. And for whatever reason, it's been a roof that's been patched, but it hasn't been addressed. But it is a six-figure roof, It's something that somebody has to take a bite out of the apple.
Projection for repairs is $131,000.
That's a big number. That's a big number. But it can only be patched so many times.
Other than the roof, is there anything else, big-ticket items that jump out at you?
There are a few things. Now, are we talking about the Civic Center in particular?
Not necessarily.
No, there are a lot of things.
But if it is in particular the Civic Center, I think we probably ought to talk about it.
Yeah.
At least be aware of it.
There are a couple of HVAC issues there. The ice machine, there's a pump that's failing. We have a pump. So these are somewhere in the neighborhood of, say $10,000 to $20,000 items, not six-figure items, but still significant. The Dectron's a big one. It's what I would consider a sleeping giant. How long will it dehumidify the room? We can roll the dice, we can take our chances, but
I was told that Dectron was undersized when it was put in there. Whether or not that's correct or not.
I haven't had somebody come and look at the machine itself. The controls are in the process of being dealt with right now. The machine itself and how it was matched to the space, I don't know. What I do know is it is old. And what the inspector said was, decide, if you're in the pool business, you should probably replace that.
And have you taken a look at the supports on that thing? I'm sorry I'm bringing this up.
No, it's fine, because you're right. And, if you look at our buildings, we have fractures that show water damage. You're referring to water damage. You're referring to rust on the supports.
Yes, I am.
And there are things that I need to look into, but they're not necessarily flagged as an expensive thing, but certainly a maintenance thing. A
Well,
structural
you know,
engineer will be able to tell us whether they're an expensive thing or a maintenance thing.
Okay. Jump in here, people, just
Well, the
interrupt
one thing that I think
me.
it's important to note is Grand Traverse County has a, I believe it's 2013, 2016 capital improvement survey that addresses, and it lists every property, and it lists maintenance issues that were identified, from roof problems to sidewalk issues to parking lot issues. The long and the short of it is, we've had that in our hands for a number of years. Every year we budget what we feel that, we can do to that. A $130,000 roof, that requires resources. And, it's easy to be critical of the fact that, this is allowed to get to this situation, but the bottom line is, this county has not been able or been in a position, or has not chosen to identify resources to make those changes. I believe our maintenance department has done a good job with what they had to do with.
The reports indicate that that's the case.
If we hadn't been doing a tremendous job of doing maintenance, we wouldn't have a jail that was built in 1964 that's still operational. It's real easy for us to sit here and say we should have done more, but the fact is, we did what we had with the resources we had available.
Commissioner Wheelock, please understand, I'm not being critical of what we have or have not done in the past.
I'm just pointing out that we have a capital improvement plan. John Sutton was on that committee, I was on that committee.
But when I go over there and I see a Dectron that's sitting on supports that are rusted, and I don't want to walk under it and have it fall on my head, as hard as my head sometimes is described as being,
Rusty metal probably scares you a lot more than it does me. It's a perception thing.
but, I'm just trying to, I just want to understand where we're going in the future, even though I will not be here.
Well, there's no question.
Because I do use our facilities.
Facility needs. We do have long-term and short-term facility needs. The question's going to be, what resources can we dedicate to those facilities?
So did we, in this new budget, set aside funds for this stuff?
So consistent with the fiscal year 16 budget, in the recommended budget, we have requested $450,000 for IT and infrastructure investment.
IT and infrastructure?
Correct.
Okay.
Because of so when given the opportunity, I'd like to take a step kind of back in the presentation of the budget and some of the assumptions.
Oh, please go.
Okay, all right. So
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Marty.
So I think that the board and Marty has hit on some excellent points, right? So the county is currently in a financial position that it's being forced to look at what is necessary as opposed to what may look pretty, right? We're having to look at structural issues before we can address the more fun things. So, for instance, in this budget, the minimum required contribution to MERS has been included. One of the things that I have done in the past in budgeting with communities has been to set a policy where each year the budget is inclusive of an amount above the minimum required contribution as an additional voluntary contribution, because the more you put in, the less you have to pay in the long run. Those dollars are working for you. It's like paying off a credit card. When I did an interview with 9 and 10 earlier today about the budget process, she said, give me some highlights, and she asked me about the pension and what kind of payment was included, because we talk so much about the pension. And I said, well, we can't forget that it's there. Just because we have a balanced budget for fiscal year 17 doesn't mean that that liability doesn't exist. So just because I may be able to meet my monthly expenses of my home budget doesn't mean I don't have to make my credit card payment and that my balance doesn't exist. So the the budget is balanced, but that debt still exists. We still have this structural issue when it comes to our DB pension and our OPEB liabilities. Tom had mentioned that our OPEB for fiscal year 16, we did include a contribution of $250,000. Portion would go to pay-go or pay-as-you-go expenses, so that's funding our actual retiree healthcare costs that are incurred in the current year. The difference being when placed in irrevocable trust counted towards that unfunded liability. The total annual required contribution as of the most recent OPEB valuation, so very similar to the MERS valuation, there exists also an OPEB valuation, and that annual contribution would be $640,000. We have only included $100,000 in this current year's budget. The idea being that GASB requires us to report that liability for the first time. So our net position for our government-wide financial statements and our governmental funds was $4 million. When that $7.7 million comes on, we will for the first time be reporting a negative net position for the county. These are very serious when looking at the economic health of the community and our ongoing ability to provide services. So I've said this now multiple times publicly, this isn't global warming, because every year these costs will increase, and every year we will have less available resources to direct to operations. The majority of our total county budget is in personnel costs, period. The general fund, again, the majority of our costs are personnel costs, but 8% of the total budget is for our unfunded pension liability in the general fund. That's significant. And as we move through our accelerated amortization schedule, if we do nothing but make that minimum payment, and the market continues to perform as MERS has assumed, that piece of the pie will grow. So again, when I was speaking with 9 and 10, I told them that really pie charts are the best way to display the budget setting process, right? So we have all of our general fund resources. That tells us how much we have to work with. So we have approximately $37 million to allocate across funds, across departments to provide support to the services. Then it is the task of the board to set those priorities, to determine, okay, if we have a capital improvement plan, what gets done first? You know, if we have this unfunded pension liability, how do we fund that? You know, do we only pay the minimum required contribution? Do we set a policy to pay that down quicker? Do we, you know, create innovative ideas for, you know, spending down use of fund balance in excess of our reserve policy? So these things all determine how we then slice up this pie. But this pie, all of those slices will have to get smaller as the MERS payment grows. There's just less to cut for everyone else to share. So if I may go back to the total all funds, so I can walk through the document. I know that this is the first time you're seeing this, but we did try to include as much information as possible to anticipate some of your questions, to put this information in your hands, some of which may not have been provided to you or provided to you in this format before. So the summary by fund shows obviously first the general fund, because the general fund supports so many of the other funds.
Okay, what page are you on?
So this is still, it's the last unnumbered page. So after the transmittal.
Okay, thanks.
Nope. Oh, yeah, one more. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so after the transmittal, this, again, acts as the
she just
table of
backed up.
contents. In the middle of the page, you see the fiscal year 17 departmental requested budget.
There you go.
So the $65,852,000, that's what is being requested and spread across all of the various funds. In reviewing the budget, you'll see that the substantial difference occurred in the general fund. The memo that was distributed to you previously had a projected deficit of $1.9 million. We obviously knew we couldn't bring forward to you a recommended budget that had a deficit of $1.9 million. So you'll see that change to fiscal year 17 requested budget of 1.8. That again was a matter of not only reducing costs, lion's share being in the Sheriff's Department with a reduction in some of his fiscal year 17 requests, but also reviewing again some of those revenue line items for reasonableness. The other funds you'll see, we had initially in the general fund requested budget that was distributed, made certain assumptions. We had removed from the Parks and Rec fund, so Fund 208, for instance, a payment for soil conservation. I keep calling it erosion. Soil conservation, but it did in fact, we do have an agreement that that needs to be maintained. So that was offset or increased the transfer out to Parks and Rec to cover that. There was, in recreating the budget data, and oversight in the front of the court for a part-time position that has been added. For instance, the Veterans Affairs anticipates now with the passage of the millage, there will be additional resources to improve services. The Veterans Trust Fund, my oversight, had not been included. That was added. Small difference in animal control to align with our projected revenues. Again, recognizing that we can only spend that which we receive. And then finally, capital improvement projects. In our initial request, we had requested $850,000 for capital improvements, both for IT and to be able to cover a lot of the structural issues that Marty has just discussed. That reduction has been shown. However, with many of the departments, especially in the general fund operating department, we've had a lot of turnover. I mean, we have to face the fact that, for instance, the finance director position, although Marissa did a great job serving as interim before I joined the team, we had significant vacancies in some of those key positions, Marty, HR director. So there are resources, for instance, in the fiscal year 16 budget that have not been utilized. One of them then being in the CIP fund. And we anticipate once we have a better handle on how the year will end, or after it has ended, the board can revisit the CIP fund balance, for instance, and it may be its desire to appropriate additional resources.
Is this budget based on fully staffed?
Yes.
Okay, I know in the past they played the game where we know we don't have X amount and they're always filled.
Yes.
And so,
We've always budgeted 100%, even though we usually run between 90, about 97. And I'm guessing that we're below the 97% this year funded, as far as filled, you know. Do we have any projection, do we have any projection of what portion of the 2016 budget will remain unspent this year?
That will be forthcoming in another report.
What happened to the $5 million?
She's like Dean, she won't give you numbers until she's got them in front of her.
Didn't we have $5 million set aside in something to go towards payment of MERS?
Pension, $5,150,000.
And that is in a separate, like an escrow or something?
We're going to talk about that at our next board meeting.
Okay, and that isn't shown in this budget in any way?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't utilized in some way.
But so as you do review, because fund balances are shown in these funds, although not all of them that were designated in that resolution for the 5.1 million, they are total fund balance and reflect the fiscal year 15 ending fund balance in our audited financial statements. So that resolution would impact the fund balance, but is not reflected.
It is not reflected, okay.
So moving forward, again, the general fund projected revenues, that's up here as well. The lion's share of our revenues come from taxes. The Transmittal does note, for instance, that a prior projection by Riemann had anticipated that we would not receive liquor license revenue in fiscal year 17. However, legislation has extended the fact that we will, so that has been included, as well as $1.7 million for state revenue sharing. Again, that's broken out by table on the following page. You can see the differences. Again, I'm kind of near the middle of the change from requested to recommended, reflecting those increases in license and permits, for instance. Captain Ritter updated a reduction in a federal grant, although just a small amount. If you were only looking down at the percentage increase, you'd see the 72%, and perhaps wonder the local unit contributions have been increased because there is revenue, and speaking with the undersheriff that we will receive that I had not included when being conservative in the requested budget. And then in charges for services, the Register of Deeds has had legislation that became effective October 1st that increased the fees that she can charge. With having 2 months worth of activity, the increase there should be a realistic estimate. And however, you will also see when turning to the next page that her budget has also been increased because a portion of her revenues must be redirected to the automation fund for IT investment. So there's a corresponding increase in expenditures for those increase in fees. So now that we're on what would be on page 4 of the numbered pages, that's where general fund begins. It's broken out by functional area, but broken out further by department. I suppose I can. You can see it on the slide here, or on the slide prior, there's a transfers out, a little pie chart, because of the transfers out, which is a good portion of the total general fund appropriation, approximately 25%. Those go to support other operating departments. So those are just listed in total at the bottom of page 5. If this is beneficial, I can continue to walk through Linda.
The Sheriff's Department, I had a question on that in the public safety, and I don't know if that would best go to Nate or to you, but the question is regarding snowmobile and marine enforcement. There's a significant increase in those, but a decrease in others. And I saw in the changes that administration made to the requested budget that those two items were not touched. I was curious if it was due to loss of grant or why we have such an increase in snowmobile enforcement and marine law enforcement.
So I did meet with the sheriff to discuss, for instance, the increase in the marine law enforcement. I had noted the substantial change from fiscal year 15 to fiscal year 16. The lion's share of that, the sheriff reported to me, was because there had not been a supervisor during fiscal year 15, and there would be an increase in staff. There was additional for the fiscal year 17 requested budget. There's an additional increase of approximately $11,000, if my memory serves correctly, in the personnel, the part-time temp line item for the marine law enforcement, with other costs being spread across, for instance, gas and equipment. The sheriff reported that there is a matching grant through the DNR that says 75% DNR, 25%, and in fiscal year 15, for instance, we were not able to fully utilize our maximum funding because of our expenditures.
So this $124,000, the $124,000 budgeted for Marine Division, does that include the 75% revenue that's coming from the DNR, or is that county appropriation?
There is, again, if my memory serves correctly, $60,000 included in the total $37 million projected revenues. So it does not include, and I could let, if the sheriff wouldn't mind coming up and speaking to the specifics of how that grant is administered and eligible costs.
Sheriff Bensley?
My main concern was if we had lost some grants or there was something that had changed, that we could do something to help with or retain those funding sources.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Todd Bensley, Grand Traverse County Sheriff. Was that a question for me, Commissioner?
That'll work.
Oh, I didn't hear it.
Well, it's a pretty significant amount, and I noticed that administration did not change anything to that amount, so I thought maybe we had lost a grant or had some issues, because I know in the past, we have talked about the grant funding for both the snowmobile enforcement and the marine law enforcement, and I wondered if something happened that changed that.
Well, the first thing you have to understand here with these grants is that, A, you're dealing with the state of Michigan. Number two is the way that these are administered by the state. For example, our budget grant request for next year is due December 31st of this year. If we are lucky, we'll know in May what we get for next year. Okay? So it's way behind the curve, number one. Number two, it's a 75-25 grant. The grant money that the state distributes to all 83 counties comes from boat registrations. And that's dropped off in the past few years. So we won't know until May how much we're going to get. And we've estimated that we will get $60,000 next year from the state. To get $60,000 from the state in reimbursements, we have to put in a 25% share, which would be $20,000. Our budget would be $80,000. To get $60,000 from the state, we have to justify $80,000 in authorized expenses. Now, there are a lot of things that we do that they won't reimburse us for. One of the tangibles is diving equipment. They don't pay for that. And there's a line item in our budgets for that, okay? They won't pay for that. They just say, nope, sorry, we won't do that. She alluded to the change in personnel, which is a big portion of that. In 2015, the person who was supervising quit. And a seasonal marine officer quit, both in June. So to help them out, I spent most of the summer between two offices. So the actual, and by the way, my salary is not reimbursable by the state. Maybe I should have had the undersheriff do that, or lieutenant or captain. We could have recouped some of that. As a result of that, and because of some personnel issues last year, unfortunately, we weren't able to get all the money that was allocated to us last year. So this year, the budget includes funding for a supervisor. That's probably for, and that's not full-time. That's
Talking about Marine Division?
That's all. So Ian Ferguson was hired in February of this year, and he is a retired Coast Guardsman. He spent 20 years driving boats. We've been looking for a part-time person qualified to do that, and this seems to fit his schedule. So he does not work 2,080 hours in the Marine Division. There are busy times and slow times. Right now, he may be working at 1 day a week to take care of the administrative costs. So the big increase is that it's fully funded with him plus seasonal officers. So depending on what the final budget is at the end of next year, and the weather drives the cost in the marine budget and the snowmobile budget. If there isn't any snow, we're not going to have a lot of people out on patrol. If it rains all summer, we're not going to have a lot of boating activity. So it's somewhat dependent on the weather. Not a lot, but it does reflect in the budget. So if we, next year, at the end of 2017, for example, spend $100,000 of authorized expenses, and by authorized, I mean what the DNR allows, and our grant is $60,000, we will only get $60,000. They will not increase their grant to match our expenses as far as a 75-25% split. Now, as far as the snowmobile program is concerned, that's the same program, but it's an 85-15% split grant. I'm told, we haven't got our grant amount for this year, which is October of this year through May of next year. I'm told it's in the mail. So we haven't been using any money. There's no snow. So what we're going to experience, depending on the budget, depending on the season, we don't know the final expenses until the end of the year. So those were some rough examples. I can tell you that this grant fluctuates up and down. When you look at the total expenses, I believe in the snowmobile budget, there was an uptick a couple of years ago in that. Well, that included the purchase of a snowmobile and trailer, and that was funded 75% by the state. So they fund equipment along with operations. And we've been pretty successful in getting equipment grants at a 75-25% cost share with both of these programs.
So Tom, if the $124,000 is budgeted for the Marine Division.
Right.
Is that general fund money and then plus the $60,000 in grant money? Or does that $124,000 include the grant money?
It includes the grant. I mean, the grant money will pay for whatever we spend. I use the budget is 124. If we spend 100, we will get 60. It's just that the sharing goes from 75-25 to 60-40. Thank you.
So if it would be beneficial, I can continue to walk through, as I had with revenues, the changes from the requested to recommended budgets. If you'd like me to continue there. Okay. So you'll see a small decrease in human resources. There has been a significant increase from fiscal year 16, and that's largely as a result of fully staffing, as well as we do have contract negotiations ongoing and pending litigation. Those costs for those attorney fees are charged to that department and are likely to continue well into fiscal year 17. Soil conservation, in speaking with, which is, what is that?
Conservation District.
The Conservation District. We have reduced the appropriation for the Conservation District, maintaining the $7,500 for building repairs and maintenance, and $20,000 for the operations of the building. Similarly, as I had mentioned earlier, there had been some confusion about the two payments that were going to the Conservation District, one from General Fund and one through the Parks Department. The one through the General Fund being, again, for the indoor operations, so the operations and maintenance of the building, and then the amount appropriated through the Parks Department for the management of the land and trails.
Okay, I have a question. Let's go back to soil erosion and sedimentation. We see an increase of, is it $30,423 from 16 to 17, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and why are we increasing? What are we doing with that extra money? What's happening there?
Is that the reorganization and staffing plan? So there was a reorganization and staffing plan in soil erosion, as well as their additional, so I had mentioned earlier about revisiting some of the revenues, so $19,000 of the revenues were an increase as a result of the change in permitting fees for that department as well.
Okay, thank you.
So moving forward, after the requested budget had been transmitted, I did receive a number of requests from the Sheriff's Department in addition to meeting with them on Sunday. Several of the requests changed other line items. For instance, Captain Ritter notifying me of the reduction in federal grant funding. There had been several requests for changes to the overtime appropriation, increasing those line items. But again, you'll see, if you had not already read in the, well, no, I suppose Tom did send a memo to the board, I recall, about the changes or the increases from 16 to 17 in the Sheriff's Department. Large majority of the initial increases, or about half, were due to personnel costs. So again, those active contracts for the 5 Sheriff's Department bargaining units include raises. So not only are there step increases, but those step increases are shifted upwards by the increases to the wage scales through these negotiated contracts. So that was 2.3% for 4 of the contracts and 2.65% for 1 of the contracts. So that shifts all of the wage scales upwards. Because many of the fringe benefits are calculated off of the base wage, or those gross salaries, those costs also increased. In addition to those negotiated items, the MERS portion of the normal cost and UAL payments increased significantly for those 5 divisions. That's broken out in the MERS annual actuarial valuation. So I do recommend, if you have not already had your nighttime reading, to read that MERS valuation. It's very insightful. So so that again is about half of the initial increase from fiscal year 16 to the 17 requested budgets. In addition, in the Sheriff's Department, there was a request for 7 vehicles, 7 officers, and a van. In meeting with the Sheriff's Department, they have reduced their request for the fiscal year 17 budget to eliminate the vehicles and the van and the additional personnel. And also they took another look at the gas expense. The projected gas expense had initially been estimated at $4 per gallon. With gas rates being what they are, although they can be unpredictable, that did appear to be high and an overestimate. So that has come down. In addition, you'll see that the corrections interim services budget has been reduced from 125 to 60. There's quite a bit of fluctuation in that particular department, with the prior year having 120,000, the current year only 35,000 through October 31st. So a reasonable estimate we came to at the time was 60,000, but again, that's based on need and use.
Can I revisit one general fund line item here? Item 257, cooperative extension. I noticed there's the separate line item, Fund 259 for MSU Extension grant funded. That's still a general fund expenditure, $32,000. Or is that something that's reimbursed by the grant and that's why it's a separate line item?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, so there is a full-time position that is currently vacant.
Okay.
The position is split, I believe it's 1/3 general fund supported and 2/3 through the grant. They're working to secure that grant funding. So as long as we do not have that funding, that position will go unfilled. The total general fund savings, should that position be eliminated and the grant request pulled, it'll only be approximately $15,000.
Okay.
I think 70% comes from Munson Hospital.
It does come from Munson.
So the cooperative extension budget is $271,092 with the 0% change from fiscal year 16 and 0 changes between requested and recommended. So $271,092 is our county tax dollars that are used to fund the MSU extension. This doesn't include any grant funding or any of that stuff?
The 271, correct. So, well, it would be less than that because of the vacant position.
Because of the vacant position, but that's
30,000.
real dollars, general fund dollars that would be utilized if that position were to be filled, and if the position weren't to be filled, we would see the elimination of the line item with the
240
grant, 259, and then we would subtract about 15 grand from the, okay.
From 257.
So the thing I don't like the most about this budget, not to harm your baby there, is the corrections department. I can find it.
So, like the second lineup.
Are they separate, or they're in general fund, aren't they?
351 on the public.
There we go. Sheriff's Correction Department. The recommendation is a $200,000 difference from the request, which, setting aside county road patrol, which I know what that is, that's additional road patrols. That's a really large deviation from requested, and I was curious, is this all staffing, or was there a request for additional corrections officers?
So from 16 to the 17 requested budget, so going from 5.2 to 5.6, there was a van and 2 officers.
A van and 2 officers for
Right.
$200,000.
400.
Eliminated the van.
Okay.
And then that also includes, again, when discussing staffing costs, that includes the step increases, the raises, the associated fringe benefits, and the increased cost in UAL. Because across the entire county, our defined benefit contribution from 16 to 17 increased by approximately $500,000.
So the overall net gain by the corrections department is $250,000, and that could cover additional officers, but we're thinking not a van. Is that?
No, none of the additional requests were included in the
No.
recommended budget. They were removed.
So this just is step increases and increases in benefits, $250,000.
I can pull the line items if you would.
Under the contract, Commissioner, the third year total is $523,000 with, this is one portion of that broken out.
Thank you for bearing with me. I'm pulling the line item. Unless Captain Ritter would like to pipe up, and he is in the room.
We
Todd
appreciate
probably
your
wants to talk
patience.
about it.
He's back here wanting to talk.
He just can't wait to get up to the podium. We can tell.
Concerned we have a loss of correction officers. I don't want to see a loss of
Nobody's going to
correction
stand in front of him.
The lion's share outside of the step increases is $100,000 for capital, well, it's $95,000 for capital improvements. Both of our fingerprint units have to be replaced. They're out of service contract. They can't be repaired. If they go down, we can't submit fingerprints to the state of Michigan. The other portion is $45,000 for an oven for the kitchen that they've been piecemealing for about the last 6 years, and they said they can't fix it anymore. So we did have to put $95,000 into capital improvements this year.
I think that the frustration about all of this is the dollar amount of those increases and benefit changes equate to not being able really to ever increase staff in the jail, along with the capital issues that we have in a very old jail. And perhaps you can see my underlying frustration with the union arguments, because as those benefits increase, it stops the ability for us to hire more people and provide better service, and certainly give some relief to your officers who work around the clock at a job that none of us would want to do. So I was just curious how that broke down. It was easier for me to do the math than to do the sheriff's department math, which encompasses so many different things like central records and marine and all of that. So overall, you will receive $250,000 more, but that is going to essentially fill union contract raises, benefit increases,
And then about 95,000 in capital improvements.
and you cannot hire or retain any additional corrections officers.
Well, with this approved budget, if it goes through, we will retain everyone we have.
Okay,
Yes,
but you cannot hire anyone.
no,
But you can retain all of them.
correct.
Of the $254,000 increase, $136,000 of that is directly related to the step increases, raises, and benefits.
It's taking one step forward and two steps back, I think, especially when you have capital needs. I can just pick out the jail just because I've been there, and on the other side, and...
Well, I can speak from the
You can
inside.
speak from the inside. I will speak from the outside. And there's just obvious needs. There's obvious capital needs in our
There
jail. There truly are. And obviously, there was a lot of discussions about building a new jail, and that's just not gonna happen. So therefore, we need to reinvest in our jail. And when these step increases come into play, and I know they were negotiated and promised, and I respect that and understand that. But when you look at really what it does to the budget, it makes it difficult to make these decisions, because it's a lot of money.
It is.
It could have been 2 more officers, it could have been a new HVAC system, or whatever it is that the jail needs. And then the fingerprint scanning that was moved to the jail, increased revenue from that goes to the jail department, correct?
Well, we moved some of the fingerprint scanning actually to...
To Bonnie.
To Bonnie.
Okay.
Yeah, to the county
So,
clerk's
okay,
office.
so backwards, do you lose revenue there to,
We did lose some revenue, but the revenue we received did not cover the officer time spent doing that.
Okay.
So it was a gain for us.
so ultimately, that turned out to be a good,
That was a
didn't-
good move for us.
Good for him, not necessarily good for
No,
Bob.
I
don't know if
appreciate
Bonnie
that.
still likes it, but it was a good move for us.
I thought so.
Yep.
If the county clerk is happy and the captain of the jail is happy, that works for me.
Well, I'm sure if we dig down in this conversation, the captain of the jail's not completely happy from some of the conversations I'm at, but that's neither here nor there. If I could, I want to back up, and Jennifer's going to be real used to me here talking about this cooperative extension budget. We have an agreement in place. It was a 5-year agreement. I think we're probably in year 4 now. We finished the 5th year. So truly, that 5-year agreement is now expired, which, required us to pay the full cost for the 4-H coordinator. And anyone-
That's got to stop.
everyone knows that I am a huge supporter of the 4-H program and have been for many, many years. But the fact is, we had a contract agreement in place for 5 years at the tune of $86,000.
That's a lot of money.
Something like that. And every year when we talk about community or cooperative extension budget, I struggle with trying to figure out how we get from that $86,000 agreement to a budget that's $216,000.
Me too.
I just,
And I have to tell you, Dean Bott was never real happy with that portion of the budget either.
Actually,
He and I had many conversations with that.
this recommended budget for co-op extension is $271,000.
That's a lot. I mean, really,
And I've asked, and
that's just me.
Jennifer's predecessor and I have had multitudes of discussion about exactly what is it I'm getting for $250,000. And, I know that they
I'm pretty sure
MSU
Captain Ritter could probably suck that up real quick in the
MSU
jail.
Extension runs a lot of great programs. Do not believe that I don't.
There are
do that.
great programs run throughout the
there
county.
are-
That's not the point. The question is priority, but I'm sorry, I'm
The question for me
interrupting.
comes down to,
That's what I do.
Master Gardener program is fantastic, but can we afford it? And I cannot, you know, and it amazes me in a budget that's as filled with as many controversial cuts as this one, that there was no cuts to that whatsoever. The requested budget was approved.
Yeah, I mean, so ultimately that is, I think you highlight a very important goal for the county and specifically for the elected body is setting the strategic plan and the strategic vision so that the department's administration and the department heads have a direction to head and that we know what your clear priorities are. If your priorities are expressed through spending, me, having been here now just 5 months, a few days ago, would not have known. There's no document for me to reflect to. So I would love to be a part of those planning sessions in the future. But there haven't been significant cuts to any department. We haven't eliminated any positions. We haven't eliminated or gone back to any of the departments and said, you know, you are being tasked with cutting 1% of your budget or 5% of your budget or a full FTE. None of those requests have been made. In fact, we worked to grant those requests because so many of the departments had been so reasonable and looked for other ways to balance the budget.
Well, you know, and I'm trying really hard to be very rational about this budget process here. But the fact is, this is the first time I've seen this. I haven't had opportunity to ask these questions. This is my,
here we go.
This is my,
right,
this is
the
my
sticky notes.
2016 line item budget. There are 327 sticky notes and line items that I questioned and went back to. And identified where there's places that I felt we could cut money. There was somewhere in the $500,000 to $600,000 that I identified in the 2016 budget that we could cut, that we probably didn't need. Maybe not all of it, but at least part of it. When this is laying on my desk tonight, and I have no opportunity to look at it, I don't have a line item budget, I have these things by budget centers, and you want me to hold a public hearing in 40 minutes to approve this budget? I just can't possibly imagine how I can do that. And it's terribly frustrating.
Now, Commissioner Wheelock, I'm going to quote you.
I understand. The budget is a living document, and I've said that for years.
And you and I have argued about this because once it's passed, it's just done. But
somewhere between a living document and 327 stick-it notes and what I have here today is some sort of a compromise that I can feel good about passing a 2016 budget. I can't, or 2017 budget, excuse me. I can't pass this 2017 budget in its current format and with the information I had and the opportunity that I had to review it.
then why don't you take some time, personal time, and sit with the finance director and go over the budget and have your questions answered?
Well, that has to happen before I'm going to support this budget.
And that's fine.
Voting on it
But we're going to have a lot more information than I have in this before I'm comfortable to pass this budget.
So I am happy to meet with any board member that has questions. My door is always open. I try to be responsive to your requests when they have been made of me. Certainly that extends to you, Commissioner Wheelock, and any level of detail. I would, again, direct the attention to those policy and strategic settings, so the board being the highest authority of the county, and setting those priorities that just as they have entrusted administration of the county operations to the county administrator has entrusted his appointed department heads, and the people have also entrusted the elected officials, they in turn have their support staff, to identify those things. So while definitely I would encourage the elected body to take an interest in making sure that the taxpayer dollars are being utilized in the most efficient and effective manner possible. I would also ask that special attention be paid to setting that strategy of keeping that big picture that then the rest of us that are appointed and serving the community can follow, because ultimately culture is set from the top down. And if we are given a plan or an objective or a goal to follow, we will better be able to achieve it. A lion's share of the work that was done to balance the budget, again, was making those strategic decisions, trying to follow what has been discussed by the board regarding its intentions on investment in infrastructure with constraints that we have while meeting the department requests. Again, some of which has been included, as in the jail's investment through his own departmental budget and infrastructure. But the heavy lifting is really at the top, and it's those big, difficult decisions about what do we do with our unfunded pension liability? What do we do with setting, for instance, the decision that was made to follow PA 152, and then the recent resolution by the board last week? Those larger vision, strategic planning decisions have to be made at the board level. That's what the taxpayers and the electorate has asked you to do. So there's going to be more weight in those decisions than if we can locate $50 in, a single department's repairs and maintenance line item. Obviously, that's a very dramatic example, but while I'm sure there may be some things there, if they're all asked to pitch in, I'm sure with the dedicated staff that I've had the pleasure of working with for the past 5 months, they would follow that direction to do so.
I mean, I would love to hear, all your ideas for cuts. I think part of what we have, though, again, we've got the unfunded, we've got the OPEB, and we've got a severe, deficit in capital improvement. And at some point, that's all going to bite us. So I would definitely love to hear all your suggestions for cuts. But I would think if we have a lot of cuts, we'd have to direct it into those 3 areas, unfortunately, because of where we're at.
When do we, this MSU extension and the, I do want to discuss that and the value of that compared to other things. When do we do that?
We're having a budget hearing now.
Well, generally, and for what it's worth, and in previous years, we've had time prior to the budget being finalized to meet with different departments and talk about what their requests are, what their needs are, and deal with that. We haven't done that the last couple of years.
I've always thought what I've been through those too.
Yeah, and there are dog and pony shows.
They sure are.
That's basically what they
Commissioner Wheelock, why would you need a staff then?
Pardon?
Why would you need a staff?
Yeah.
Why would you need a staff? If you want to go in each individual department and go line item by line item, why are we here? There's no reason for us to be here.
And I invite you to find any department head that's going to walk up to that podium and go, you know what I want? I want you to cut my budget and cut my staff, and I'm going to do a lot more with less. Because they're already strapped to do a lot
They
more
all
with
did a good job
Yeah, it's
knowing
done.
per line item the situation we're in. We haven't had to make position cuts and things like that because they came to us knowing the situation and had done a pretty darn good job being realistic about it.
There is not one person or one service cut out of this budget. I'm not certain what more you could ask for. There was a lousy resolution passed by this board last week, that's for sure, because if that does pass, then we have this mystery money we have to find, and then we will be cutting people and positions, which is exactly why I didn't vote for that. And good luck to the Sheriff's Department finding another $115,000 out of their budget. Lousy resolution that this board passed. But when you go back and you look at this, this is why we're here. Every single one of these people are running a department for us and are here to answer our questions. So ask your questions. You don't have to take time off of your job to go meet with them while they're working. You can ask it now. Or you can meet with them now and set up a time to do it. I'm going to ask my questions. I appreciate the sheriff and Captain Ritter and, of course, Marty, who's hiding back in the corner, for answering these questions. Because there are some things that just stand out on the budget, because our staff already did their job to analyze and put a spreadsheet out to show us what we have. If they were coming forward and cutting dozens of employees, yes, that's when you look at it. There is not a person cut. I just looked, I thought for sure corrections was cutting somebody with that number. They aren't. They aren't. Now, they will if this dumb resolution goes through that this board approved. But regardless, I think that the budget is what the budget is. And if we want to talk about Michigan State Extension, now's the time. Jennifer has taken her time to come here, and we can find out more about it. You know, we have full-time jobs, like we can't, and so do they. Like we can't bother them while they're working. The last thing any employee wants is a commissioner showing up in their office while they're trying to get their job done during the day. So Dan, if you want to talk about Jennifer, Jennifer's there.
I don't want to talk about Jennifer.
I want to talk about Jennifer.
But you know, there's certain mandated things we have to do, and there's other things that are non-mandatory we don't have to do. I realize that even of the mandatory services we have to provide, there's a certain level of mandatory services we have to provide. When I look at MSU, and I was raised in 4-H. When I was in 4-H, the 4-H members and their families funded it. It was like Boy Scouts, it was like Girl Scouts, it was like Little League. It wasn't funded by the county. And when I look at this, it's like $200,000 some, am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a service that we really have to continue funding?
It is not a service that we really have to continue funding. That having been said, I happen to agree with our administrator and our finance director that this is, under the circumstances, I think this is an outstanding job that they've done, that they've presented to us. And if the board next year, and I won't be on it, so that's why I'm pushing it to next year, if they want to take a hard look at MSU Extension, I think you should. And I have said this, and Jennifer has heard me say this many times. I don't think we ought to be funding MSU Extension to the level we are funding. We do not have to fund a full-time 4-H director. We can take a look at partnering with other counties, which other counties in the area do. They partner with, each other to have maybe a part-time 4-H director. There are many, many options. I suggested one today. I said the Safe Kids program. We have lost the person who was our expert at Safe Kids, and it happens to be Captain Ritter's wife, Jen. She has gone to Metro Fire, and I congratulate her on that move. Actually, I congratulate Metro Fire because they really did pick an outstanding employee in hiring Mrs. Ritter. But that having been said, perhaps that Safe Kids program would be better administered in a partnership with Metro Fire and Munson Hospital rather than Grand Traverse County and Munson Hospital. You know where I'm going with this. But anyway, there are a number of options. All that having been said, I think those options need to be explored after the first of the year.
Unless if that resolution goes
Chime
through.
in, Carol.
I mean, the amount of money for the MSU Extension is the same amount of magic money we have to find if that resolution gets upheld by the 9 bargaining units. That's this board.
I
Because
know.
all of a sudden, we have an out-of-budget balance.
I know you don't like that resolution.
It's a ridiculous resolution. It's great that the employees will all get to pay 15% instead of 20%, but it comes with a price tag.
I know.
And that price tag is very high. And Jody already told everyone, the OPEB, we've set aside 200 and some odd thousand in a minimum required 600 and some odd $1,000 payment. We still have to find almost $500,000 there. Then we've got the $250,000 if that resolution passes that we have to find. And this is a great budget, and you're right. I agree with you there, but it becomes not so great of a budget if this board is determined to pay the OPEB, and if this board has the bargaining units accept that resolution. And I'm going to say the same thing I said to all of you before. Where are you going to cut to come up with it?
Well, but Jody's point is well taken. This board has not directed staff to do any of these big changes yet.
She's right.
Okay, so given that, this is a pretty damn good budget. You know?
They've done a fabulous
Done a nice job, yeah. Now, so I don't see us changing it right now, but I do in the future wonder what we're going to do. I mean, don't hold your breath, by the way, that they're going to accept the 15%.
Well, they got till the 14th is all right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're gonna know very
This
soon.
board will
We'll
have
know.
to balance a budget based on that resolution
And we
being
will.
accepted or not.
We will.
So I'm saying, while we can praise this, and they did a lovely job, it will change in a week,
did an
possibly.
outstanding
Really.
job. Really,
To the
you
tune
did.
of almost $1 million. Good luck. I mean, that's when we start cutting. That is it. This is a great budget if we can keep it.
So this is a public hearing here. Okay, that.
No, this
No.
is,
No.
this is a study.
It's a study session.
Time to
Carol,
ask the department heads if they're-
jump in,
I
Carol.
do have a comment. This is a great budget. But I have to say, and I'll probably get yelled at, whatever,
Get ready.
that you are wrong when you say that nobody has been cut in this budget. No positions have been cut. 7 positions were cut from this budget. And that was done at a time when the deficit was $4.1 million, and I get that. It is a lovely balanced budget. But 7 people basically lost their jobs for this budget.
Are you talking about us?
Yes, I
Okay.
am. So.
We're
I
going to
just thought
talk
that
about,
needed
we're
to
going
be
to
said.
talk about that at 6 o'clock.
We can find 7 other county employees willing to go so that the county board can get paid.
Carol,
That was
we're.
not my intent. My
Carol,
intent was just
we're
to
going to
point
talk
out that-
about
that
it,
7
we're going to
people
talk
did
about
lose
it
their
at
job.
6 o'clock.
Fine.
I'm going to add it to the, I'm going to attempt to add it to the agenda, and we're going to have another discussion on commissioner compensation. It's not something that I care to revisit, but you do, and I respect that wish, and we'll see where it goes.
Now I'm going to go back to the employees that actually make their living working for this county. And it's ridiculous to bring up elected officials' pay. But back to this budget, there will be people who this is how they pay. These are full-time jobs, 40 hours a week. Being a commissioner is not 40 hours a week. 40 hours a week, they come here, they work, they put their kids in daycare, they have health care payments that just went up. This is their job. And I'm telling you, if that resolution passes, or if we decide to fully fund OPEB, to a minimum payment, mind you, 1, 2, 3, 4, a dozen of those families are going to have their lives changed forever. That is why I gave up my pay. Dozens of families, this is their
You
full-time
did
job.
not give up your pay.
Yes.
No.
They can go out, you can go out and get a job. They
We're going
can't.
to argue this at 6 o'clock.
I
We're
will make a
not-
motion right now to reinstate commissioner compensation.
We can't make a motion.
Yes, we can.
It's a study session.
It's a study
Then I will make the motion that we will.
We're going to
I will
look
say
at
we
it.
will look at it
We will
tonight.
talk about it at 6 o'clock, Commissioner
I
Coropa.
can't believe the
we're,
gall of discussing 7 people when we're talking about 500 county
One
employees.
thing that I do need.
I happen to agree that we,
It's embarrassing.
I happen to agree, I don't intend to change my vote, but if we want to beat the dead horse, I'm willing to do that. Go ahead, Commissioner.
gonna be
I think
beat.
it's important to note, we talk about MSU extension, and we talk about the 4-H coordinator. Trust me, the 4-H coordinator doesn't make $271,000. There's a lot of other things that MSU, or however we're titling
Yes, they
it
teach
today,
people to
do.
can.
But the fact is my problem with that budget has always been the same. What am I getting for that $271,000? If Jennifer wants to answer that question right now,
I'm pretty sure she does.
You know, it's easy for me to talk about the 4-H piece because I know about that piece, but I know that there's a lot of other services they provide.
Yes. And so, excuse me again, my name is Jennifer Berkey. I work for Michigan State University Extension, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight to answer any of those questions. So what you're fundamentally kind of struggling with, it sounds like, Commissioner Wheelock, is the cost of MSU Extension services plus then the cost of running the office, and that's kind of what the 271 adds up to. So when we look at our kind of full-year budget that we projected for 2017, it includes the cost for MSU Extension Services, which includes that full-time 4-H coordinator, plus then the cost of the support staff, the office supplies for running the office, and those types of other costs associated with running that, our office, I guess is the best way to describe it. It also includes our vacant position for Jenny Ritter, and the reason why we've held that vacant is because we're waiting to make sure that our Munson partners are on board, and as Commissioner Max Bauer nicely articulated, is it really our role and scope to provide that programming, or are we going to figure out a better way to do it through our partners with Rural Metro and Munson Medical Center? So again, that's been intentional. There was a death in the family of a member at Munson, which is why that has been temporarily paused. We've been working with Jenny Ritter on that, as well as Munson Medical Center to see, and that's what we're waiting on, is for this individual to come back from leave. So that's where you're seeing the cost. So MSU Extension is funded through the number that you referenced, the full-time 4-H program coordinator, the cost for MSU Extension Services, then plus the cost for the support staff in the office and the indirect costs of running that office supplies, fax machine, those kinds of minimal expenses. So that's how our budget comes up to be that $271,000. As far as looking at our budget from a longitudinal standpoint, we're down 20% from 2010. And so we've been, in my mind, very good county partners to really minimize our costs while maintaining or exceeding and increasing our level of services. When one thinks about our services, Commissioner Max Bauer did articulate that we do work with home food preservation, as she said, canning. We also have our signature program, 4-H. We do a huge amount with local growers. Grand Traverse County is home to the largest hops growing area in all of Michigan, and that's a direct result of the work by Dr. Rob Serine. That infrastructure and in development of over $a multi-million is an added benefit to this county from the standpoint of increasing the diversity of our agriculture crops. Obviously, our tart cherry crop is very important to us, as well as our wine grape industry as well. Both of those industries are served well through MSU Extension, helping those growers be more profitable, helping to make sure that they're growing so that you have the benefit of those increased revenues through those business centers. I know we also have a great handout that does summarize our impact within the county from a fiscal perspective, because investing that $271,000 into MSU Extension is a 1-to-8 match, meaning for every dollar that you invest in us, at least $8 are brought back to this county through educator time that are paid by state, federal, or grant dollars, as well as investment by the university. We're the beneficiary in this area of having a research station, which is housed actually in Leelanau County, but then it feeds into all the growers in Grand Traverse County. We also have a medical facility that we have invested in from the university, and so there's 2 new researchers here doing research for Grand Traverse County. And we have a nice handout that summarizes that, and I think Jenny has that. Do you want to pass that out?
Jennifer, does the 271 include the rent that MSU Extension pays to the county, or do we not charge you square footage rent?
They don't pay rent.
Right. So
They're
again,
the only department that does not pay rent.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is this an all or none kind of thing? Can we, I'm not saying today, but sometime can this board, maybe next year, look at it and say, like a smorgasbord, you know what, we don't want to fund this, we don't want to fund this that much? I mean, what are our choices in terms of funding this? Does it have to be 271?
well, that's the cost that we would need to operate as we are currently right now. So when you look...
I'm saying, can we diminish that?
I would say that we have made some targeted cuts over the last, 7 years to the tune of 20%. So I would need to look at that budget center and say, these are potential opportunities that we could do.
That's not what I'm asking. I don't mean to be rude.
No, that's okay.
I want to get to the point. is it all or none? You're offering us a variety of services. Can we pick a service we don't want to pay for?
I see what you're saying. You're targeting the services. Well, the MSU, no, I would say the better answer is for the cost of the MSU Extension services. That is, you get the whole bundle, meaning, you know, we provide the agriculture, we provide the business entrepreneurial through our product center work, we do our health and nutrition work, that's all funded by grants. So it's kind of all bundled together, if you will. It's all of the services.
So if I said, you know, for me, I represent a giant portion of people on the Michigan Peninsula that are benefiting from Duke and the other scientists that help them. Let's say my people that vote me in want to keep that, but maybe they're not in favor of the canning program. Okay, can we do that?
I would say the answer to that would be no. From a standpoint of how do you know what each resident wants, and I don't necessarily know if they would
Well, see,
fully...
that's the point. It's really not, it's up to us, all right? And that's the thing. I want to know, what is the attitude of the MSU Extension? Can we select programs that we do want, we do feel we want, and not fund programs we don't think we want? Do we have that opportunity?
As it stands now, the way that we're designed, I would say the answer to that would be no. It would be the bundle of services that's available to
However, our
everyone in the
agreement
community.
with MSU Extension is up at the end of this year, so I would suggest that perhaps we write a new agreement. Commissioner Johnson?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Dr.
I mean, I can see us saying we're going to cut the budget by an X amount, but I don't know if that's our position or role to say, cut this service and not this. I think if we cut them, they should decide what their service is.
I'm not saying that we should do that. I just want to know what's available.
I'm just saying, I don't know if that's our role.
I don't want to cut it. I just want to know what our options are.
Yep.
That's all I'm asking. So I don't want people out there thinking I'm trying to cut MSU or 4-H. I'm not. I just want to know what the options are. And every year I ask this, I get the answer that,
Every year.
well, you take it all or none. And I want to know the truth about it. And then I want my staff to know the truth about it, so that they can ferret it out.
I believe we can follow what other counties have done. Other counties don't have the...
The educational part?
No, they don't.
I'm going to bite my tongue.
MSU, through their
Mark your calendar.
program, or through the basic program, funded if I recall correctly, and I get a little senile some nights, but that the 4-H coordinator was funded to the point of 50%. Grand Traverse County was asked to fund the additional 50%, and we have done that for the last 5 years. So, you know, that piece
We
is-
get a 4-H coordinator with a minimum payment. I've checked.
Right, but that person is 50% funded, or it's only a half-time position. Grand Traverse County has agreed for the past 5 years to fund that position to a full level, or a full FTE, and that's an additional piece that we paid. You know, for me, it always comes down to whether it's co-op or extension, or whether we're talking about programs at the health department or the sheriff's department. Grand Traverse County provides hundreds of programs throughout this community. All of those programs come with a cost. And all of those programs, you know, with that cost is someone in this community depends on that service. So when we talk about making changes to those services, or we talk about changing the way we do business, if you will, it's difficult because even though you and I might not think this program is important, someone in this community depends on that program. So that's where it's always tough to make program changes for public services. But the question that I always have for MSU Extension, because I'm a little disconnected to what they do, is they have all of these programs, but I never really can get a handle on how many people actually participate in some of them.
Well, I know in our annual report that we did present to the board Last year, we reached over 13,000 members in this community through our programs, and I would say that's always an at least, because sometimes we have more than that, and it's just hard to track them based on the actual service delivery. But these were actual individuals that we collected demographic information from during our programs.
You know, we have the same situation with the pool. The reports that you give us are wonderful, and the stuff that you do is wonderful. The question is, can we afford to do it, is the question. And that's where, I'm not saying this board should make cuts like that. I think we should defer that to our staff and have them give us their advice. But there's no doubt that what the MSU Extension does is wonderful and beautiful. And there's no doubt that we need the pool. But can we do it all? So
Maybe I might help move it along. We could, as staff, do an evaluation of the benefits of the program and bring it back to the commission for evaluation and discussion, if that would help, and then you might have more drill down and more clarity on it, if that's something you'd like us to do.
Well, I would like that, because I'm always kind of confused about it.
I'm not going to weigh in because I won't be here.
You know, I'm struggling in that, you know, it is 5 minutes to 6. We are on page 4 of this document and trying to figure out, this is our only scheduled work study for this, for work
Next week.
schedule for this thing, and we're supposedly hold a public hearing on it tonight.
No, next Wednesday at
No,
4,
no,
right?
there's a public hearing tonight, and the budget is to be adopted next week.
That's correct.
There's a public hearing scheduled in tonight's agenda.
Well, why don't we just cancel it?
No, let's have the public hearing.
What is he, what is
But
he?
the public has not had this in front of them.
We have got to pass a budget by December 31st, folks. It is nobody's fault
No.
on staff or on this board that we've got an antiquated piece of crap of a computer system and somebody hit a delete key and took out all of the personnel information, and our finance department had to start over again. We've got to pass a budget by December 31st. If y'all want to, revise it after the first of the year, revise it. But by law, we have got to pass a budget. And we've got a public hearing scheduled tonight. We're going to take a look at it next week and either pass it, revise it, or not. But we've got to move forward with this. I understand nobody likes the time frame here, but it's nobody's fault in this room. And we, by law, have to have a budget by December 31st. Change it after the first of the year if you don't like it.
What's our option of having another study session the 21st or any time that week? Who all's going to be around? Because I personally would like a little more time to study it too. Just,
We could do it 4 o'clock.
I'd rather study it for an extra week.
Next Wednesday, we do 4 o'clock?
I want to hold the public hearing tonight. You can decide what you want to do regarding the 21st. We can revisit it, but by law, we have got to have a public
And it's
hearing.
not the 31st yet.
I know. I understand that.
Madam Chair, we could do another study session on the 12th, if that would help. Another option would be, again, on the 14th, at 4 o'clock, if that would be helpful.
No? Okay, I misread that.
No. You want to go for the 14th at 4 o'clock again?
Yeah, I personally would like another study session.
But you have to publish it with a 10-day notice for a public hearing. And the 14th is 7 days from now, which is why I want to go ahead and have the public hearing officially tonight. We can still come back on the 14th. We can take public input for as long as you want to take public input on the 14th. But by law, we have to publish it 10 days before we have the public hearing, and we're running out of time.
We have to have a meeting tonight.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, if I may.
Unless I'm wrong.
No, so there are opportunities for the public to speak at every open meeting of the board. So if the board were to proceed with a public hearing this evening for the public to voice its priorities, in the public, or in the budget setting process, again, in a slightly different situation because we have not made significant cuts to any one department, but they could voice their opinions tonight about the budget priorities or about the millage rates that have been set by the board and anticipated with the creation of this budget. They will have additional opportunities to speak at any additional study session or meeting of the board to adopt the budget. The 14th was originally a study session, which is why it had been proposed for potential adoption of the budget. Mr. Menzel will be out of town on the 21st, which had some play in that, as well as perhaps some of the availability of the board members at that 21st meeting. So there's any number of scenarios that we could play to create more opportunities for study sessions and adoption prior to the 31st. Again, none of us, myself included, wanted to be in this position. I did my best to display the information in a useful format so that your eyes and your attention were drawn to the most pertinent information. So those changes from one year to another, those changes that have already been made from requested to recommended, and then from there give you a point to drill down. So if there have been significant increases in one department, to ask questions about why, or if there have been decreases in a department where there may have been a priority to increase spending, to then have that discussion and give us that direction. So again, really giving you this higher level as the board overview of the budget so that you have a starting place from which to begin asking questions and to drill down to 300 sticky notes.
Okay, so, am I hearing? Do you understand why I want to go ahead with the public hearing tonight?
Yeah, but
We don't have to pass the budget
and
until...
with something of this magnitude, though, I would like to have a few more meetings. I mean,
That's
I
fine.
have no problem with doing the public hearing, because yes, in
All
any
right.
other meetings, we can have discussion and
Okay.
whatnot, but I want more
All
time
right.
to digest. I'm
That's
happy
fine.
with what I see,
All right.
quite frankly, but I would still like some more time to look at it.
That's fine, and that's fair. So we will have another meeting on the 14th, if that's acceptable to everybody?
4 or 6?
What time?
4.
Well, now, wait, I've got a conflict here because at 5 PM we have an ad hoc committee.
We have the
in
BPW.
For BTW.
We can,
So that'll be done, can we start at 6?
we have a
Currently
meeting.
scheduled
We
for
have a meeting.
It's currently scheduled as a special meeting for the budget at 6 on Wednesday.
All right. So we're just going to go ahead and have our meeting at 6 o'clock on Wednesday.
On the
We can have our
14th?
discussion, and if everyone's comfortable at the end of the discussion, we can pass a motion to amend the budget, or approve the budget.
Or-
we can direct
Or amend
staff
it.
to
Or-
amend it and come back at a later date.
That's fine. Okay? Is that fair?
So, 4?
6.
6 on the 4th.
6 o'clock on the 14th.
Okay, and that's gonna be a budget meeting.
Yes.
Speak slower for me.
Are we all right with that?
You already scheduled for
I'm not
Madam
seeing
Chair,
any...
I would just encourage any individual commissioner who has a lot of individual questions to please contact Jody and get your questions answered, and we can certainly then be a step ahead prior to the 14th, so.
Okay?
Can I request a 15-minute break in the meetings?
You can after, okay, presentation, discussion. We have to have our second opportunity for public comment, and then we will take a 15-minute break before...
I'm going to adjourn now.
You go ahead. This is our second opportunity for public comment. Going once, going twice, seeing none, we are adjourned. And we will take a 15-minute break before we begin our next meeting.